All right. So, Trent, really hard to be successful in just one industry, like being a pastor, in a church, whatever. But you made the NFL, starting quarterback, won a Super Bowl, then went into broadcasting, and I've seen you on ESPN, Fox Sports. Like, there's some dumb jocks. You're not a dumb jock. You give an intelligent answer. I used to love to watch you. And now you're in coaching, won a state championship in high school. Now you're at UAB head coach. I have no doubt you're going to be successful. I guess what I'm looking for the business guy out there, for the single mom raising teenagers, what's the secret sauce? How are you able to find success in all these industries?
I never been asked that question. I'd say having a growth mindset,
Okay.
for one. I think I've always tried to be better today than I was yesterday in some realm. It hasn't always happened that way, but definitely looking at every day as an opportunity to get better at something. I think where my faith has been weaved into that is answering calls. When I feel that the Lord is moving me in a direction, trusting Him, even if I'm uncomfortable, it's not the direction I want to go, that it's where He's taking me next and where He's going to use me. And there's confidence in that. I think I've gone to each thing that I always say each mountain I've gone to climb with the confidence I can get to the top, because it's not my power that's going to get me to the top.
Wow.
And I think there's a supreme confidence in that. And it's not in your own abilities, and I do think you have to recognize I'm a little down on the overly humble Christian, right? That's like, oh, it's all the Lord.
Yeah.
Well, the Lord's gifted us with certain talents. He grows us, and He wants to be glorified by us using those talents. So I know I've been uniquely gifted in some areas, and I want to use those gifts to be successful, but at the same time to make sure He's getting the glory for that success. So I'll just say there's a supreme confidence when you go to climb another mountain and you're like, well, I know I'm getting to the top because I know the engine that's getting me there.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm a big fan of Tony Dungy.
Mm-hmm.
Love that his stand for Christ. He was your coach at Tampa Bay.
Mm-hmm.
He was a fairly new head coach. I guess that was your first team you played for.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like to play under Tony Dungy?
What a great example of somebody that does it right. There's so much done wrong in football. And Tony, his intent was to always do it right. There was never a question of whether his heart was in the right place. He hired really good men. I mean, my football hero in my life is a man named Clyde Christensen. And Clyde played football at UNC. Clyde coached me. And then unfortunately, Clyde had to go downhill from there. He had to coach Peyton Manning and Tom Brady,
Right.
which I feel bad for him.
I do too,
After
yeah.
leaving me, he had to go do that.
Right.
But Clyde, he was Tony's right-hand man. And I got to see a great father of 3 daughters. I have 3 daughters.
Right.
I got to see a great teacher. I got to see a man that would cry with you, laugh with you, teach you, try to get the best out of you, hold you accountable. I got to see a man that poured into the staff. Clyde's job was to do the spiritual development of Tony's staff. He did the same thing in Indy. He's done the same thing as he's gone back to Tampa. But Tony hired really good people. As a head coach, and we'll get into this later, I think it's the most overrated position in the building, to be honest with you. I've said this publicly. But what job isn't overrated is who you hire.
Right.
Who you hire that have touch points in every aspect of the program need to carry on your core values and you need to understand that they're going to have massive impact in these players' lives, good or bad. And Tony did a great job of hiring men that would have a positive impact in the lives of us Buccaneers and then future Colts. And then what I've learned the most, people ask me what I learned from Tony and Dungy and Billick and all these coaches I played for, Romo Connell, and my vignette with Tony is thoughtfulness and poise. He was very thoughtful in his approach to everything. He showed great poise in the midst of a storm, and those were not my strengths. I was a reactor, and I was an emotional roller coaster as a young player, and to be able to watch Tony model thoughtfulness and poise in the midst of crisis has had a huge impact in my life.
You said director of spiritual development. That's interesting. I didn't know some of these NFL teams even had that. I mean, I've heard of chaplains.
I don't think it's public.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it's public facing, but that's what it was.
All right. Wow. Yeah. That's very cool. So their job was spiritual life.
Yeah. So Clyde ran the team study. The coach's study. He poured into every room in the building, and he did it usually through the coach. A vibrant coach's Bible study year round at every place he's been. A mentor to so many coaches, and I think the overflow of him pouring into coaches filtered into the rooms they were coaching.
Okay. So I want to go back to a time, just looking back at your career, that I just would love to know maybe some leadership principles and just how you did it. So signed with the Ravens in 2000.
2000.
And so you were the backup to Tony Banks when the season started. The offense, I read, didn't score a offensive touchdown for like
5 weeks.
5 weeks.
I was only part of one of those weeks. I always have to qualify that. I always have to qualify that.
So you replaced him. You're the starter. Lost the first game you started, but then you guys didn't lose another game the rest of the season. Like, what changed? What happened that year and y'all went on to win every playoff game, won the Super Bowl, beat the Giants 34-7, blowout in the Super Bowl. What changed?
Well, something didn't have to change. That was the mentality of the defense, right? So even in the midst of us being clunky, the defense was still dominant. And I always tell people, and I had just come from the 99 Tampa team. I signed as a free agent in Baltimore in 2000, and we went to the NFC Championship game in 99 and had one of the better defenses in the league with Warren Sapp and Derek Brooks and John Lynch and go on and on and on, Rondé Barber, and some of the great players that have played in the last 50 years in the NFL. And I got to camp in Baltimore, and it took me about a week to realize that this was a better team. Like, the Baltimore team was a better team than the team I just left in Tampa. And that wasn't saying anything bad about the team in Tampa. In fact, I would call John Lynch and Brad Culpepper, two of my best friends in Tampa, and be like, man, like, these guys are really good. And John would say, like, yeah, I saw them on a crossover tape or something, and yeah, they look gnarly. Yeah. So I saw that, and then, it was getting funky there. We were playing horribly offensively. Defense was still playing well, and you can see that kind of tipping point of, this is going to be bad culture here pretty quick if something doesn't change. And I always say it was less me changing. It was less me going as a quarterback, the player, and more me going as a quarterback as the energy, the positivity, the grit, the determination, the toughness, hey, let's find a way to instead of find a way not to mentality. And I didn't play very well. Like, if you go back, and I played pretty well the first few weeks. I was dealing with some injuries and just wasn't myself. I was a shell of what I was my first 6 years in Tampa physically. But really grew kind of this, again, the supreme confidence, knowing that this was a calling. I can't remember a time in my spiritual life that I was more dependent upon the Lord. I wish, I've had seasons of that since, but like that was every morning because my body was so broken. Lord, I can't do this. Like, I can't. Like, I cannot do what I'm being asked to do. But somehow you can through me. And I don't know what that looks like. I'm too immature to really know what that looks like. in my walk with you, but I trust that that's going to happen. So I was so dependent. That bred a confidence, like, oh, okay, I'm not walking in my own power. Like, this is some supernatural stuff. And I'm not a charismatic. I'm not, trying to freak anybody out, but it was some supernatural stuff.
Wow.
And I just started seeing that energy, that trust, my presence help change the vibe of a team. I don't know if it changed how we played, but it definitely changed the vibe. And I think once we started rolling, and once the defense knew that the offense was complementary, is probably the best term I would use to what they could accomplish. I mean, we knew we were never going to lose a game. Like, it was arrogance. We knew we were so much better than everybody we would play, that the challenges ahead of us weren't going to be as big as many thought.
Wow. That's cool how you were completely dependent upon the Lord in weakness. And I could so relate to that. There are Sunday mornings, I'm tired.
Yeah.
I'm like, Lord, I don't know what like I'm prepared, but I don't know how it's going to come out. And I'm like, that whole idea, God, when I'm weak, be strong through me.
It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So you were in that weakness, but you had this incredible confidence. That's pretty cool. So here's the part that I didn't understand. I'd love to, excuse me, just kind of hear your state of mind after it happened. You win a Super Bowl with the Ravens, and they didn't re-sign you.
The only one in the history of the NFL.
Really?
Yeah, only quarterback.
What was the backstory on that?
It depends who you talk to. It's now been 23 years. I don't know if I've ever gotten an answer that I'm satisfied with. And I'll be honest with everybody listening. It's the only thing in my life that I struggle with bitterness on. And we're going to get into my life. I have some things that maybe I could be bitter about. I'm not. This one, the Lord and I are still talking through this one.
Yeah,
this one hurt because I felt like the decision was made without all the information. And in the NFL, there should never be a gap in information. Right. There's so many people that are gathering information, data, and then distributing it throughout the decision makers in the organization, that this information should have been out there. One, just the injury, just what I had been dealing with. Right. But basically, they told me I was their third choice. I mean, I'll just keep it really simple. Brad Johnson, who Brian Billick, the head coach, had coached in Minnesota, was their number one. Elvis Gerbach, who was a guy that had a lot of success in Kansas City statistically, and they never won anything, but statistically he had been really successful, were their first two choices. And if they said no, or if they couldn't get the contracts right, they would come back to me. I dealt with some anger. I dealt with some frustration. I think I still deal with some bitterness that I didn't get the chance to go climb that second mountain. And any champion will tell you they get excited about the opportunity to repeat because it's so difficult. Repeating championships is so difficult.
Yeah.
And us as competitors, we want hard things. We want difficult things. We want bigger mountains to climb. And that was really what was disheartening about that, was to go through what we went through as a team, a brotherhood, and then watch it on Hard Knocks, because that's what happened. That was the first year of Hard Knocks. And they went and chronicled the next year's team, and I was the missing piece. And there were very few. Like there was very, very little attrition from that 2000 team, and I was the biggest piece of it. So it was very difficult, something I'm probably still dealing with a little bit. Now, I've also healed a lot knowing what the rest of the story was, where I was going. But it was a tough one.
And just looking at your story, watching interviews, that period when you went to Seattle was a dark period in your life. I don't know, spiritually, emotionally, what was your mindset then?
So are we going down the whole Seattle journey right now?
Sure.
Want me to just take us down the journey?
Let's go.
All right. So I get to Seattle after that, and I signed late. I had some other opportunities that I just wasn't real excited about. I'd always admired Mike Holmgren. I'd played against him in Tampa when he was head coach at Green Bay. Brett's 3 MVPs were during my time in Tampa. Watching the championships he built there. And really, they should have won more than one Super Bowl. That Green Bay team should have won 2, 3, 4 Super Bowls with Reggie White, Brett Favre, and Leroy Butler. I can go on and on. I mean, they had so many great players and great competitors. So I was intrigued because one of the things I recognized after I kind of decompressed, not being re-signed, or unpacked, maybe is a better way of saying it, was that I wasn't as good as I should be. And I had to look at the man in the mirror and be like, I'm not what I should be at this stage of my career. And I want to get better. So I think Mike can help me get better, and that staff. So I go to Seattle. They had just traded for Matthew Hasselbeck, who had never started a game in the NFL. But they had told him it was his job. So I went in knowing the success I had had as a backup in Baltimore with kind of the same approach, that I'm going to serve this team, I'm going to serve this player, I'm going to help us get better, not just me, and I'm going to use the Seahawks. As I serve them, I'm going to use them to help them make me better. And it worked. I got exponentially better. I got healthy, for one. I mean, that was the biggest thing. To get healthy again for the first time since '98 was, I was like a new man. I was like, oh my gosh, my body can do this. So that was revelatory. Great doctors, great training room in Seattle, great support staff to help me get back to my best. I think Matthew would tell you this, to be able to help his journey early on. His transition from backup to starter, although it was rocky, it was very positive. We're great friends to this day, despite some tough circumstances. And then watching a team that wasn't very good, and this is kind of like the theme of my career, that goes someplace isn't very good, and by the time I leave, we're pretty darn good. And to see us get better over the 4 years was a big deal. And I think a lot of those teammates to this day are still dear friends and respect deeply how I approached being the best team guy I could be. Now, in the midst of that, a lot happened. So the first year I ended up winning every game I played in, and Matt lost most of the games he played in. So that didn't go real well for Matt. Then the next year, it was, I was now the guy, and he wasn't the guy, and I get hurt. I ruptured my Achilles, the game that Emmitt Smith breaks the rushing record in Dallas. And then that off season is the off season that we lose our son. So,
and just for those folks watching who don't know the story, maybe tell us a little bit about that whole.
So we have 4 kids. Maddie, who's 26 now, Madeline, who's married to Christian, and they just had our first grandchild,
Congratulations.
Decker, who's 6 months old. By the way, being a grandparent, I'm saying now that kids are cool, dogs are better, grandkids are the best.
I love it.
That's my joke with my kids.
Great.
No, but being a grandparent's the best thing ever. And then our son, Trevin, who'd be 25, he's in heaven, and I'll go backwards on that. And then Tori, who's 23, plays professional volleyball. And then Delaney, who's an all-conference superstar volleyball player at Liberty.
Oh, cool. My daughter's at Liberty as well.
All right. So the story of Trevin is he was 5. I went back to California for the off season, and we were doing a family vacation down at Disneyland. And he got sick like any other. I mean, we had a lot of kids at the time, so we had a lot of sick kids. You've all had them, and it was no different. Like, it was literally no different. It was, 101 temperature, but still wanted to fight through and ride the rides. But as a couple of days went in, the Tylenol wasn't working quite as well, and he was kind of listless, and there's definitely something different. We're like, okay, he's really sick. So let's get back to our house and take him to the doctor and see what's going on. Well, about 24 hours after we get home, he's really listless. Like, I mean, it's like he has no energy. He can't really respond to much. And we get concerned. So we take him to the emergency room, and doctors there, nurses there, kind of do some blood work and realize, hey, there's some blood issues here, possibly some form of hepatitis. So let's get him overnight at the Children's Hospital. So I can't remember the exact time. Let's say this is 7:00 on a Wednesday. I take the other three. Delaney's a baby at the time. She's 6 months. And the other two, I get in the car and we drive back to the house. My wife's going to go in the ambulance with Trevin to the Children's Hospital. And I get a call 20 minutes later, your son is coded. You need to get to the emergency room. You need to get to Children's Hospital. So I walk in, I go bust through these doors, and I walk into a male nurse manually keeping Trevin alive. I get the scoop, and through the course of the night, they actually came out one time and told us that they lost him. And the same male nurse worked the whole night, and he just wouldn't relent. He was doing everything in his power. And now that I look back at it, by an act of God, this was not, although he used this male nurse, he used these other medical professionals, but by an act of the Almighty, they were able to get him on this ECMO unit, which is a heart-lung bypass machine. And, they cut him from here to here, and, they got all these things in them. And they told us there's no way he's getting through the night. Like, we don't know what happened yet, but his heart has basically eaten itself. And this machine was keeping him alive. And I don't know if this is important, but this is right at the beginning of the war in Iraq. So all these medical helicopter transport units that use this ECMO unit had deployed. And when he gets through the night, the doctors came and told us that, hey, this is a miracle he's even here, but now we have another challenge, is we got to get him to Lucile Packard in Palo Alto, Stanford's Children's Hospital, because we can't support him here on this ECMO unit long enough. The problem is that patients are transported in these helicopters and they're all gone. And they can't be transported any other way. And what happened was, through a series of godly events, an incredibly godly man that I knew told the hospital that's not an acceptable answer, and he would pay for any type of solution. And they came up, what they told us was the first time they had built one of these floating units in an ambulance. And it's going to take about 24 hours, if Trevin would even make it to that point. And we're going to transport him in this ambulance. And now they prepped us at any moment if we hit a pothole, at any moment if something haywire goes here, and one of these connect whatever, some doctors out there going, well, I know exactly what he's talking about, pops open, like, it might be over. And then the next challenge is, once you get them to Lucile Packard, if by some odd chance that happens, and they were literally like, you have a 5% chance of this working. So we had kind of come to terms with losing our son. If we get there, well, now he's got to be transferred upstairs to the 3rd floor at Lucile Packard, and another ECMO unit be put on him. And that has to be done without him getting infected. Because if you get a systemic infection as a heart-lung transplant candidate, you're no longer a candidate. They're not going to give a heart or a lung to somebody that has an infection. Makes perfect sense. So we're like, the odds of this there's no way it's going to happen. Well, we get to Lucile Packard. Wow. We get to the ICU. He gets the new ECMO unit put on him. He does not have an infection. They check for days and days and days. And we're just walking by faith and watching this happen. Waiting on a heart. And it hit me, and this is, I don't know if I'll cry. I've told this story so many times, I don't know if I'm going to cry right now or not. I never know. One of the more painful realities we came to understand was that for our son to be saved, another family is going to have to lose a child. Because they ain't taking a 70-year-old heart and putting it in a 5-year-old. Right? They're taking a 5-year-old's heart and putting it in a 5-year-old. So that was, I mean, I remember the meeting vividly. I could walk into Lucille Packard and sit in the chair that I was sitting in when this reality was told to us. And our prayer became, Lord, we don't know what to ask for. Like literally, I didn't know what to ask for.
Yeah. I mean, because somebody else has to sacrifice their life for your son to live. That's a hard prayer.
Yes. So we go 32 days of unknown, and then we're told he has an infection. The time on the machine was just so long. It was inevitable if he didn't have a surgery, a heart transplant, that he would eventually get a systemic infection. And he did. And then became this next thing of, oh gosh, what's end of life look like? Like, do you let him suffer? Like all this counseling. You know, how old were we? We're 31, I think, at the time. And we're like, we're not prepared to answer these questions, to make these decisions. Through great counsel, there's so many other stories of the Christian community rallying around us during this time. But we had to decide that at day 40, we were going to take him off life support. Wow. And ironically, what killed him was a virus. And as this COVID thing's been happening, we're like, yeah, we lived this in 2003. Like we had a virus attack our son's heart, and it rotted his heart in a matter of 48 hours, and he's in heaven. Now, here's a great story to it all, and I think this is the celebration of this story. And I think this piece of it has probably been the most impactful piece, as now I've spent, 2003, I'm doing math, 20 years telling the story. Was in October of the year before. This was April. October of 2022, we did what's called crazy dinner night as a family. I was playing. It's in the fall. You don't get a lot of time as a dad, NFL football player with your family midweek. Mondays are the best nights. Mondays and then home weekends, right? But Mondays was our night. Like I would grind at the office, review the tape, get my work done, and then the family knew we were going to crazy dinner night. Now, crazy dinner night was just, I'm sure you guys do it too, it's just a fancy way of saying we're doing breakfast for dinner because my wife doesn't want to cook.
Love it.
Yeah. My wife doesn't want to cook, so we're going to do breakfast. And we would visit all these different breakfast spots that were open for dinner. And this pancake house in east of Seattle was kind of our favorite jam. And we were going there, and I think it was probably the third or fourth time we'd been there. And our big thing is we'd do word searches together. And we'd color, and I have no artistic ability whatsoever, but I can color now.
All right.
I can bold out those lines. I can shadow the crayon. Like my kids thought it was pretty darn good color. Yeah. And we'd do, like all the games that they'd have on these paper placemats. And we get done, and typically when you have 3 daughters, where the women always goes the bathroom. Mm-hmm. Like it's together. Either it's beginning, it's middle, and it's end.
Right.
The potty trip.
Right.
And so the 4 ladies head to the bathroom, and Trevin and I are paying the bill, and we're walking out. And we're right by the hostess stands. He pulls on my pants. He says, "Dad, I want to know Jesus."
Wow.
I'm like, yeah, let's go. I'm fired up, man. Let's get home. And all, he goes, "No, Dad, I want to know Jesus right now. Like, I want to know him."
Wow.
I'm like, okay, like, let's do it. And we go
Pancake House parking lot. It's just like
Pancake House, vinyl bench right in front of the hostess stand.
Wow.
I'm walking him through everything. He goes, "Yeah, Dad, I want to know Jesus. I want to pray right now and ask Jesus into my heart." And we're sitting there on our knees. I'm leading my son in the prayer to receive Christ, and the girls are walking by. I don't know that because my back's to them.
Right.
We happened to park facing the window where we were praying. So the girls are sitting there looking in the car as Trevin and I are praying, as Trevin's praying. And he comes to know the Lord in a real authentic way. I mean, he got it now. This was not just a, hey, Dad, I want to know Jesus because my older sisters know Jesus.
Right.
This was like, Dad, I know who this Jesus is, and I want to know him, and I want him to save my life type prayer at 5 years old. So we get in the car, and it's parties, it's high five, it's we're celebrating on the way home, and all good. But I look back at that, and you know, everything as Trevin went home to be with his real father.
Yeah.
There's a peace that transcends understanding that Paul talks about in Philippians that very few really understand. It's words to most believers. It's our lifeblood. You know, for the Dilfer family, that's our lifeblood. Because, you know, that... I don't know how I have peace with it. I'm actually at a point now in the last handful of years that in my time with the Lord each morning, throughout the day, I thank the Lord that Trevin is with him. Wow. Now think about that transformation. You lose a son, your only son, and you can get to the point where you're actually, Lord, thank you so much that he's with you instead of me, because I would have messed this up. He'd have to be part of this corrupt world. He'd have to deal with all the injustices going on. He'd have to have been quarantined for a virus. Like, he would have had to go through this that we're going through. Instead, he's with you, his real dad, in perfect peace and perfect harmony, living the way he was supposed to be living, because this isn't our home. Like, literally, that has become my prayer.
Yeah.
That's not a me thing. I suck, by the way.
Right.
But the one I serve is amazing.
Yes.
And what he can do to your heart and do to your mind, that's when I get excited about my faith. It's not just going and sitting in a pew and listening to some awesome dude give a sermon. It's not doing life better. It's not a playbook for life.
Right.
It's a relationship. It's a supernatural process that goes through you when you truly trust the one that made you. And when you go through these things in your life that are unexplainable, that are more painful than you can possibly imagine, and yet you have peace through that, that's the relationship with Christ that I want the men that are going to sit in these seats to have as the people that I just got done coaching, the rest of the people I interact with the rest of my life. I want them to experience that.
Yeah.
Because life's hard and tragedy is going to happen and we're going to have loss. And but when you have the master of the universe living in you, you're unbreakable because he's unbreakable. And I think that's the celebration to that part of the story.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I love that you did, and I think we could all learn a lesson from this, and it goes back to what you said at the very beginning on how to be successful, the courage that you took. Like, you didn't go, oh, Trevin needs to go talk to a pastor, or, you know, we got to wait until he really... Waffle House in the lobby, the bench. I don't care who sees it.
Yeah.
He's ready. We're going for it. I love that.
Well, how many times has your congregation been sitting there and you give the gospel presentation and you're like, hey, if your heart's itching, like if you're sensing the Spirit moving you, raise your hand or come up or tell somebody next to you or however you do it.
Right.
And you're probably listening to me say this right now, like, yeah, I've ignored that a couple times. And I don't do the come to Jesus because you're scared what tomorrow brings thing. I've never done that once in my life, but I've experienced it. Like, what if Trevin wouldn't have been, what if he wouldn't have said that?
Right.
What if I didn't pray with him and then the next day, like, forgets about it because he's 5?
Yeah.
Like, this story would be a lot different.
Yeah, it would. That's right. So when did the journey of faith begin for you? When did you become a Christ follower?
So I trust Christ at 10 at a summer camp, Camp Hammer in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Now I was the kid that went up like this is an exaggeration, but 35 times in 3 years.
Yeah. Right.
Just wanted to make sure I got it right the first time. No, it was like a multiple thing for me, the altar call. But I honestly believe that that moment, it was authentic. It was real. I trusted him with my life. I definitely understood the Savior part. I don't think I understood the Lord part for another 11 years after that. There were periods of that 11-year walk where I felt like I walked closer to the Lord. I was trying to do the right things. I was trying to grow spiritually. I was involved with good people. And then there was times I was 180 degrees different. I lived a hard stretch, 18, 19, 20, where I did some really destructive things, hurt myself and hurt other people with some of my bad decision making.
Sure.
But then it's a neat story how I met my wife. Well, not how I met her. We'll be married 30 years in July.
All right.
And that, when I got to Fresno State where I went to school and played football, she was a swimmer there. And we had a class together, study hall, and I was like, that's the one.
Right.
And we dated one time and she thought I was boring, which is the only time that's ever been told to me. And she but really she thought I was a knucklehead. And I was. She was right. And she was trying hard to walk with the Lord. And I went to an FCA camp the summer before my third year in college. I redshirted. That's why I say my third year.
Yes.
And I got to see 36 other college athletes that were truly walking with the Lord. And it was that moment that I said, okay, I've known you as Savior, but now I'm going to know you as Lord. Like, wow. I'm both feet in now. Wow. And I came back to campus. I didn't have a single Christian friend except her. And I called her and I was like, hey, and this is like rotary phone call now. Yeah. Hey, this happened. I know you probably don't believe me. Now I know why you think I'm a knucklehead, because I was. I'd really like just to start hanging out because I don't really have anybody, and I don't want to go back to my old friend group because my old friend group's doing the things that I used to be doing, and they're destructive. And she said, okay. She was very, very seriously involved with a kid from Oklahoma that she says now, I think mainly to bust my chops, that she was going to marry. And but she played that game. And this is advice to everybody. If you want to steal a girl, start a one-on-one Bible study.
There you go.
Yes. So if you start a one-on-one Bible study with the girl of your dreams,
right.
You most likely will steal her from whoever she is dating.
She's not doing a Bible study with him. So
she's doing it with me. Therefore, yeah. I got an inside edge there. Right. So, we actually got engaged 6 months later and married 11 and a half months later.
Wow.
So we got married in college, and but that was kind of my journey, and then ever since it's been like in any of our faith walks. There's been times where I thought I was very self-centered and trying to please the world more than I was trying to walk by faith. Many times, yeah. But I think more than anything else, just understanding whose I am, and this is not my home.
Yeah.
That always brings me back,
yeah, and
settles my walk with the Lord when I start realizing, oh, I'm not my own. This isn't about me. This isn't my home. I shouldn't be that so caught up in this stuff.
Yeah,
that kind of brings me back to my Father.
So you've worked in NFL, broadcasting, now coaching. Pretty high divorce rate in all three of those. I mean,
yeah, we're unicorns.
Oh man,
with that stuff.
Yeah,
lost son, NFL veteran family, TV family, coaching family.
Right, high divorce rate. But you've been married 30 years. What do you attribute to this great marriage? I mean,
I wouldn't call it a great marriage.
Okay,
I don't think she'd call it a great marriage. No, it's been. I joke saying that, but yeah, there's been tons of rocky times. Oh my gosh, with what we've gone through in our lives and raising 4 kids and the rigors of NFL life, TV life, coaching life, me being a knucklehead. I mean, yeah, it's been a roller coaster ride. I think we're both from divorced families. And I think making that commitment that we're not going to do that, no matter how rough it gets, we're not going down that road. I think also recognizing that whose we are
Mm.
has been the glue that's kept us together. And then when we go backwards, the willingness to regroup and go forward again.
Mm.
I think people forget how simple that can be. Like, you're going to go backwards. You're going to say the wrong thing. You're going to make a bad decision. You're going to get sick of each other in certain ways. Little things that used to be cute are going to be nuisances. Like you've probably done a ton of marriage counseling.
25 years been married, yeah.
But some of it, like I think we allow little things to become big things. And I think my wife and I have really not allowed the little things to become too big, too long. Right. And the big things we've addressed as big things, and made sure there was healing and forgiveness and repentance. I think there's a big piece of it. Like I had to go to her and be like, man, I really messed this up, and I'm asking for your forgiveness, and I want to move away from that. It's not just saying you're sorry; it's actually moving away from that sinful pattern. Grace, like what happened to grace, by the way? Mm. If there's one thing I want to tell the body of Christ is what happened to grace. We've been shown so much because we all suck.
Yes.
Right? But yet somehow we've been shown unlimited grace, and we can't show grace to our neighbor. Mm. We can't show grace to our wives. So I don't know if there's a formula, if there's a book there. We've read we've sat under the leadership of a lot of good people, that have walked us through times. We've got counseling. Like I'm the biggest counseling fan in the world. Because I think counselors have the greatest job ever. They get paid to sit there and listen, right? And sometimes you just need somebody to listen. You don't necessarily need advice a lot. You just need somebody to throw up on who can take it. And then the wisdom from those counselors to be able to say, hey, have you thought about this? Mm-hmm. And so we had a lot of counseling after we lost Trevin. We've had mentors counsel us in the rocky moments of our marriage. Now we have our kids somewhat counsel us and hold us accountable. So I don't know even how I got started on there, but yeah, I mean, it's to think that it's a 30-year great marriage. Like some of our favorite people in the world have been married like 50 years. And we go, man, how have you done such an awesome 50 years? And they'll go, you mean the awesome 4 years? We're like, what? Like, well, no, like if you're married for 50 years, it's like not all 50 are awesome, right? It's not kumbaya for 50 years. So, and the wives are going, yeah, you're telling me. Like I've come to realize how much she's put up with, my ego, my selfishness, my self-gratification, my pride, like all these things that just get me in trouble. Every new thing I tackle, and she's the one that brings me back and like, oh, hey, knucklehead, you're going that way again, huh?
Right.
I don't want to make that mistake again. So there's a lot to it.
So you're a passionate guy. When you were a player, now as a coach, you're all in. Mm-hmm. What do you say to that guy who's sitting out there, Generations Church, who's watching this YouTube video, and he's like, become a Christian. Christians are so passive. Yeah. I gotta check my man card in at the door if I'm gonna be a Christ follower. What do you say to that guy?
I've never understood that. I'm pretty confident I've done as many manly things as you could possibly do in your life. My life's been pretty full with manly things. Not once has my faith not allowed me to do a manly thing. Now, if objectifying women's a manly thing, I think that's been jacked up then, right? Like if that's what you're worried about, yeah, this probably isn't the thing for you, right? Because that's going to be renewed. That's going to change. I don't know, whatever other things are categorized as manly. I think there's strength and weakness. I think true manhood is vulnerability, it's transparency, it's understanding your greatest strength is in your weakness. It's saying you can't sometimes and I need help. Now, it's also being the one that comes alongside that helps his friend saying that to him. Like, to me, the manliest men are the ones that can go help their brothers that are struggling with stuff that we've admitted we struggle with too, right? A manly man can raise a daughter and play tea set with her,
Right.
right? Or dress up as a princess like I did many times
Yes.
for my daughters. Be a shoulder to cry on for your daughter. A manly man can talk to his son and raise his son in a way that he's a warrior for Christ. They can help change people's lives. I would argue there's nobody in this audience that's physically tougher than me. I've been through more physical stuff than anybody in this audience, most likely. My faith has made me tougher, not weaker. I faced tragedy, right? And had to be a man to my family in tragedy. My Savior has been my strength in my weakness. To me, that's manly. That's how to answer that question. I think the definition of manliness is what's jacked up,
Yeah. Right.
not putting our faith in the Savior of the world.
That's good. All right. Can I do like a speed round?
Yeah.
Just throw.
You can
some
do whatever
music.
you want.
All right. Awesome. All right. So speed round, just quick answers here.
Yep.
Favorite team on any level, high school, college, pros that you played for?
Get somebody mad here, no matter what. My college experience, Fresno State.
Okay. All right. So on a barbecue restaurant, this is a personal answer. So pulled pork or brisket?
Texas brisket only.
Come on, brother.
Now, not just brisket. A lot of people mess up brisket.
Yes.
I lived in Austin for 2 years, Texas brisket.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, you might not want to answer this. Best payday you've ever had?
Payday?
Payday.
The day I was fired from ESPN. Golden parachute.
All right. Okay. Who's winning the Super Bowl and why?
I'm going to go with Eagles. And I thought the Chiefs were invincible at watching them through the year. The Eagles' ability to control the game. Like, when you can control the tempo of the game, you create panic for the other team. I think the Eagles' ability to control the line of scrimmage and running the football offensively and creating explosives off the run game, not just the pass game, I think the Eagles win.
All right. Hardest hit you've ever taken from a defensive player?
Johnny Randall, it might still be on YouTube or somewhere, is on NFL's hardest hits in, let's call it 96, 97, 98, somewhere in there. I get hit in the back, and I've been told that my heels hit my helmet. I don't know if that's physically possible, but it hurt so bad. I played the next snap. I don't know how I did. I thought I died. And I've ruptured both Achilles. I have 11 separated shoulders, 14 concussions, broke bones in my back. I have a fake knee. My other knee needs to be replaced. I have 2 degenerative hips. But that one hit, I think, started all this other stuff. I think it stole my soul.
Oh, man.
Yes.
I'm going to have to YouTube that one. That
Yes.
sounds vicious. What's your favorite verse in the Bible?
Philippians 4, 6-8.
Oh, man. That's good. That's good. That's the one about anxious for nothing.
Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything through prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God that transcends all understanding will guard your heart and minds in Christ Jesus. And I learned about, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, my prayer changed when I really realized the Thanksgiving piece. Present your requests to God with thanksgiving.
Yes.
And it changed my heart on thanking Him for hard things in my life. And that was kind of the instigator of now there's peace that transcends understanding.
There's middle schoolers, high schoolers, all kinds of college students sitting out there. What's the, one word, one thing they could really work on these next few years to be where they need to be tomorrow?
Solitude. I think it's the lost art of faithfulness. You go back and you read the Puritans, you read the ancients, the ones that walked so closely to God in a time where everything was brutal. It was that those moments of solitude, the time where it's just you and the Lord, no distractions, getting to know Him.
Mm.
My daughters, I admire my daughters so much. They're my heroes, and they have developed habits, all three of them, of just this incredible time with the Lord. Whether you call it quiet time or solitude, or you start your day with this designated time where this dumb phone and even books sometimes can clutter your mind. Just times where you're truly spending time with the Father. It kind of fixes everything.
It really does. It's
right?
amazing.
I mean, you're looking for secret sauce in your life. The habit of solitude will fix more things than anything else, because it allows the Spirit of God to start really changing you and supernaturally changing your perspective and the words that come out of your mouth and the attitudes of your heart and how you see the world. Like your lens changes. The first thing you do that day, all of a sudden you see it through a different lens, and you start creating habits that way. And I look back at my walk, when I haven't had solitude is when I live for the world. When I do have solitude is when I live for the Lord. It's like this equation. No solitude, live for the world. Solitude, live for Jesus.
Be still and know that I'm God.
Yes.
I mean, start with that. That's so powerful. Okay, so when I was getting recruited to play in college, I had a visit to Liberty University when Jerry Falwell Sr. was the guy.
Yeah.
And had the opportunity to have lunch with him, and he gave me his pitch. And this guy was so good at just selling. He could sell anything. And he said, Troy, we're trying to make Liberty the Notre Dame of evangelical schools. I want you to come and help us make that happen. And I grew up in Texas, lived 1,000 miles away, and they played Slippery Rock. And I mean, they were just like,
it was bad.
It was tough. Yeah. So I didn't go, but I never forgot his words. Like, he gave me a vision. This is where Liberty's going. And so you came to UAB, and you're turning this program around. You've got, what's your vision? Like, where do you want this thing to go?
Yeah, we want to develop rare humans with rare habits, with rare standards, which will produce rare successes on the football field. But more importantly, it'll produce rare professionals and fathers and husbands outside the football field. Rare as an acronym, blah, 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 but nobody cares. Basically just trying to wrap their brain around living a life that is set apart. That's what we called it back at my old place I was at. And I saw it happen. I saw when kids decided to live a countercultural life, that it produced rare results on and off the football field. My overall coaching philosophy is very simple. And by the way, some of the greatest coaches in football totally disagree with this. And that's okay. And I might be wrong here, right? Like, they might be right, I might be wrong.
This is an experiment.
Yes. Now, I would argue that I've seen it happen at a higher level than most.
Okay.
That there's this bucket. Okay, let's just visualize a giant bucket. And every day you're pouring into that bucket good habits, getting 1% better, having rare energy, having a positive attitude, learning how to serve, learning how to become last before you're first, academic discipline, daily discipline. I'm just pouring all these life things into this bucket. We pour enough in that bucket, what happens to buckets? All these things are liquid, by the way. As that liquid starts growing, it starts overflowing. The overflow of that is great football.
Wow.
The overflow of that is great football. If you have enough of the physical stuff. Now, we're not recruiting you any longer. Okay?
I hope not.
I don't want 54-year-old has-beens.
Right.
I can do as much of that bucket to you, and you're not going to play well for me.
Right.
But there's a lot of kids with a lot of physical ability and a lot of traits that haven't been unlocked and unleashed because they haven't filled that bucket. It's been a transactional experience in their athletic life. Like you go lift, run into people, catch, tackle, whatever, or else. I'm like, whoa. You're a really good athlete. Let's serve you. Let's give you everything in life that's going to help you be a great husband, a great father, a great leader, a great professional in something. That's going to unlock this athletic potential to help you become a fuller version of you. We talk about chasing your best every day. Well, how do you chase your best? You're given stuff, life, as tools to go chase it. Wow. We get 120 dudes and 40 coaches chasing their best every day. We resource them with the goodness of life and the goodness of stuff. I believe we'll produce rare results. There's a lot of SEC teams I'd go play in a parking lot right now with the group I already have. Wow. And with the coaches I already have. You want to meet me in a Walmart? We're in.
Right.
And I mean that. And we proved it. I thought the high school game was a great testing ground. I got offered tons of NFL jobs. This ain't the first college job I've been offered. I was called to high school football. And I think God did it because he wanted to prove to me that his method works. That was the 3,000th ranked team in America when I got there. They had 38 kids on the roster. The entire high school football program was 38 kids. 6 lifted with PVC pipes.
Wow.
Okay? We did this, and we just finished the 11th best team in the country. We have 5 seniors that are playing the SEC. We had 20 kids off last year's team that will play college football, 20 the year before. They had 6 that lived with PVC pipes when we got there. And everybody goes, oh, you recruited. No, I didn't. It's illegal to recruit. I never went to a junior high game. I never went to a basketball game. I never went into a house and said, hey, 8th grader, come play. No. Yeah, did we present ourselves on social media and in the public? Did we go serve our communities so those kids could see us serving their communities? Did we bring in great coaches and great resources so families wanted to come there? Absolutely. But what we did was this. We filled the bucket. Every day we filled the bucket. And all of a sudden, kids that were told, you shouldn't play football, you're too small, they're playing college football.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, kids that were like, he's a pretty good athlete, he's an SEC kid. Oh, you have this coordinator, coach's defense, he has 14 shutouts in 2 years. Oh, you can't go play with Alabama 7A football with this little sleepy town. Yeah, we did one on the road and we beat them. So, and it was, I'm not saying we're great coaches, great X's and O's, best strength program. I don't know about all that. We filled this bucket every day. Every day we poured into this life bucket and it just started overflowing every day. And that was the football. And that's what we'll do at UAB.
So you're talking to, public school teachers, you're talking to retirees who volunteer in our public schools, even Christian school teachers. You're at UAB. It's a state-sponsored school, and you've talked to me about spiritual directors. You're talking about filling a kid's cup. How can they fill their kid's cup that they influence in their in their environment where there's a lot of restrictions?
Yeah, there's restrictions. Yeah. Everything I've done, I've tried to creatively package to the secular community. So I've been doing this forever in the camp series is everything we've done is a Jesus message covertly packaged some other way. I think the easiest way, I'll go back to it, so many people are showing grace these days. So many aren't forgiven. So many aren't authentically loved and held equally accountable. I think we just start there. If you just start there, they feel Jesus. I think people feel Jesus more than they hear about him. There's no restrictions on making a young person or an employee feel Jesus. And that's just with daily interactions.
Yeah.
They're eventually going to ask you how. Well, they'll do their work on their own.
Yeah, that's good. You mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned it, but Elite 11, your work with all these high school kids. For our viewers that aren't familiar with Elite 11, the best of the best quarterbacks from all over the
Mm-hmm.
country come to a competitive camp, and you were the head coach of it. I'm assuming you're not now
I
because,
can't be now.
yeah, conflict of interest. Yeah. So, but I mean, Matt Stafford, Tim
All of them. If they're in the
Tebow,
NFL, they went through it.
yeah,
If they're a
Justin
Power
Fields,
Five
to
star,
you
yeah.
got relationships with all these guys. This could be a hard question, I don't know, but who's the guys I admired? A lot of them. I mean, who's been, I don't know, one or two or three of your favorite quarterbacks that you've ever mentored?
Tua is one of my favorite, not just because he's a great player, he's just a great kid. We still have a great relationship. I'm really close to his family. Helped train him for the draft. Justin Fields was unique in every way. Caleb Williams, at USC, he was one of the more unique ones. Jared Goff and I have a great relationship. A kid named David Blau that you've probably never heard of, but is a kid we found out of Texas that had 0 stars, 0 offers, and has played 7 years in the NFL now. Had a great career at Purdue. Great Christian man, incredible family, just an awesome guy. I can go on and on. Really good relationships with most. Some, Joe Burrow I said no to. Think about that. Like he was the 25th of 24 guys we had invited that year. We evaluate 700 and get it anywhere between 20 to 24 and then whittle it down to 11. And I remember talking to Urban Meyer about Joe. And I really liked him. So just because he's 25 doesn't mean I didn't like him.
Right.
But, you say no to the Joe Burrows, no to Baker Mayfields. We've said no to some, and some of them still carry it. Most of these kids grow up dreaming more of the Elite 11 than they dream of the college they're going to, because it was a TV show for so many years. And it was kind of, if you were in the Elite 11, then you were going to be a Power 5 starter. Like you were going to Oklahoma or Texas or Alabama or whatever. So, but it was a great experience. It was an awesome testing ground for this philosophy too, because this is what we did with Elite 11. It wasn't a camp, it was a culture. And the culture was, we're going to pour into your bucket and see if that helps you become a better player. And it did. And so we had a lot of confidence leaving the Elite 11 to go to the high school thing, knowing that philosophy would work. So we have a lot of confidence going to this college thing and knowing it would work. I would argue it would work in the NFL. Now, it wouldn't work the same. You'd have to tweak this model. But there's something, it's not rocket science. Like, help people become better versions of themselves, and they'll produce more for you.
Right.
How hard is that? Like, I guarantee you're a better pastor, and your congregation knows it when your buckets are being filled.
Absolutely.
Your family, your mentors, your small group, your accountability groups, whatever, your business leaders in the community.
And they're a better church when their bucket's full.
Yes, and you're filling their buckets, and your small group fill each other's buckets, and your accountability groups fill each other's buckets. And when you go serve the community, which I'm sure you're doing at a high level, that's filling the big bucket. And the big bucket overflows into accounting, principal, NFL football coach, college football coach, administrator, fireman, police officer, small business owner, right? Like, you're better at that because your bucket is being filled up and starting to overflow. I didn't make this up. I stole this from somebody. I don't know who. But it's exactly, Jesus. And it's working.
That's awesome. So you mentioned gratitude earlier, and I'm with you on that one. I love that's something God's done in me as I've gotten older as well. You mentioned, I saw an interview somewhere, your last days at ESPN, a little bit jaded, a little bit hard. How do we finish well with gratitude, with joy, being who God's called us to be?
And I will say this: I've seen some of those things come back, and I've watched them. I'm like, oh, I didn't want to say anything bad about it. I love my time at ESPN. I love the people there. The issue was with me. It was an ESPN issue. They didn't change. They started changing a little bit, maybe politically, which was uncomfortable for me. But it was, I had changed. I was living for me. And had developed just some bad habits in life, and wasn't the same husband, and wasn't the same father, wasn't the same leader. That's not ESPN's fault. That's my fault, right? So, it didn't become purposeful. And it's interesting. I remember when I first took the job, my wife and I had some hard discussions. I had a chance to coach in the NFL, and I had 3 networks. And it was like this juggling of, do I coach in the NFL? I actually had a management opportunity in the NFL and a coaching job in the NFL and 3 networks. And she really wanted me to coach or go into management. I didn't feel it was the wise thing to do with the girls being young. And I remember as we prayed through and we talked through it, we came to kind of a unified decision that this would be a great interim job. And we don't want to put a length on it, but we felt somewhere 3 to 5 years. And as I look back, the first 3 to 5 years were awesome. Loved my experience at ESPN. Loved to coach the nation on football.
Yeah.
Right? Like that was how I felt. It was like I was going up there and I was teaching you something so you could enjoy the game more.
Yeah.
Right?
Dilfer Dom.
Yeah, whatever it was.
Yeah.
You could enjoy the game more. The last 4 years, I probably shouldn't have done because I knew probably where I was headed. Instead, I hung on because of the money, the freedom, the lifestyle, the fame, all the things that come with the world. The last 4 were about the world, and they were miserable. But that's not ESPN's fault. That's my fault. Right? Like, I made a bad decision to sign the last contract and to do something I wasn't being called to do. It took being let go, retiring, and then being called into the thing that I think I was being called into after 5 years at ESPN, but I kept saying no to. Like, I didn't tell that piece of the story. Like, I audibly heard the voice of God in church saying, why do you keep saying no? 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 And it was like ringing in my ear because I said no after 5 years at ESPN to going and coaching. And so there was 4 more years there. There was 2. So for 6 years, I'd been saying no to God and yes to the world. And it was that moment. I went home. The girls, Cass and Delaney, went back home before me, and I stayed there just in solitude at the church going, what's going on, God? Like, this freaked me out a little bit. I went back and I said, we're going to China to become missionaries. Because that has to be the worst thing to do.
Right.
And my family's looking at me like, you're crazy, Dad. And I said, no, but seriously, I'm done saying no. And you guys are rolling with me, whatever I say yes to. Whatever God has next, I'm saying yes. And it was worse than China. It was Nashville high school football coach, starting with 38 kids, 6 that lived through the PVC pipe.
Right.
But like that, to me, is one of the coolest parts of this journey is I started saying no to God and yes to the world. And that was a very empty. I made a ton of money. I played golf every year's golf audience. I played golf 218 times in 2018.
Wow.
I'm a +2 handicap. I belong to 5 country clubs around the country. They're some of the best. I've played every one that's on your bucket list. I've won golf tournaments. I used to be a golf freak. ESPN paid me a ton of money. I only worked 48 days a year so that I could go play golf. Right? Like I retired at 45. Never had to work another day in my life to go play golf. Like I've done what you're saying. Oh man, I want to follow Jesus because I might not be able to do that golf trip with my boys.
Right.
I know I've done that. Right. I chased the world and it was empty. And then I said yes to God, and I've never had more juice. Like I'm 50 with the juice of a 25, and I walk like an 80-year-old, but I got the juice of a 25-year-old.
Right.
And it's because I've answered a call. I said yes instead of saying no, like I did for 6 years.
Yeah. That's awesome. Oh man, this is good.
You don't have to ask me a lot of questions.
No,
just tee me up and I'll go, baby.
You do. You go. I've got most of mine answered. Oh gosh, you guys. Anything else that you want to say? That you've talked about the gospel. You've talked about your story. I mean, it's beautiful.
I think if you're looking for, there's a lot of heroes right now in sports. Go find the right heroes. It's not the guys scoring all the touchdowns or driving the Maseratis or living in the big houses. It's the one serving their communities. It's the one making a difference every day. I can think of a bunch right now, but like professional sports is awesome. Like I would encourage anybody that has the chance to pursue that, to get paid to play a game, to create generational wealth for your family, the ability to give to others. Like the wealth that we accumulate to be able to give to others is amazing. And there's so many great Christian men and women in professional sports right now. Go to theincrease.org, right? And just start following them. Like listen to podcasts, Sports Spectrum, like go seek out your heroes, young people. But they're not the ones that Fox and ESPN and NBC and Fox are necessarily selling to you. Those are fantastic athletes and they're great players. And I'm in awe of what they do too. But if you're watching this on Super Bowl Sunday, there's a story behind the story, right? You're going to be sold one story. Go find the real story. Because I guarantee you there's been something that's happened on the Eagles and Chiefs in the past few years that has internal impact, not just the impact of holding up a trophy or wearing by the way, a ring that sits in my underwear drawer most of the time. I rock it when recruits are in town.
Right.
This does not define us.
Yeah.
Right? This is not a tiny little piece of my life. There's a God story that's going on in professional sports that you can go find now. And I'd really encourage you on this day, especially, go find it.